Pacer Nation, what's going on? Welcome back to your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. Facci and I are here. We showed up for this podcast, unlike the Pacers, besides Pascal Siakam. You know, they did not show up for the game, and they lose big time, 109-94. Facci, I mean, we wanted to talk about this game. We wanted to break it down. We were hoping that we'd have something positive to talk about, but man, outside of Pascal Siakam, pretty crappy night.
It was a rough one, and I gotta say, all leading up, this was a long week. It felt like Pacer Mania was running wild. It felt like all the big media members were picking the Pacers and talking highly, and once again, on the cusp of getting that respect. Very reminiscent of that in-season tournament, that run. It's just the Pacers, whenever everybody finally is on their side, unfortunately, I don't know if they get a little too comfortable, they don't show up, whatever it is. Tonight, they did not show up, and that first half was one of the toughest first halves I have seen in quite some time, and that is never going to cut it in the playoffs.
I will say this. I had friends over tonight to watch the game. I'm glad they were over because it kept me from being insane watching this by myself because it was just so disheartening. I couldn't believe the effort that this team played with after having, like you said, a whole week off, ready for the playoffs. And you're right. I think Pacer Mania was running a little bit wild. I saw people
Too
on Twitter
wild.
saying that, oh, the Knicks don't scare me. Well, you haven't even played a
Exactly.
game
Yep.
against the Bucks. Okay. This is a championship level team. And I know they have not been playing like a championship level team all season long. But, Damian Lillard dropping 35 points in the first half and just cooking Indiana left and right. It didn't matter what they threw at them. They finally made some adjustments in the second half. Thank God they did that. And hopefully they'll continue to do that moving forward. But, Damian Lillard just went off. Now, I think it's interesting, Facci, for the 35 points that he scored in the first half, 0 in the second half, and was a -6 in 38 minutes. So they still won the Dame minutes, which is just weird to me.
It really is weird, and I think that's one of those stats that you hear and you go, huh. And it gives you maybe a little bit of hope to be like, okay, you know what? Maybe the Pacers maybe they learned something defensively in that second half that they could carry over into game two. And there were some of those weird stats out there. Like I'm just gonna throw this out there. We didn't want to see Doug McDermott out there in this game. McDermott was a -17 in 7 minutes. I do feel that there are some things that you can clean up that can give this Pacers team a big advantage going into game two. And it's interesting to see that as big of an impact that Dame had in that first half. In the second half, he was non-existent. The Pacers had opportunities to threaten the Bucks. They just could never capitalize. I felt like they were their own worst enemy at times. And maybe this is that reality call, that wake-up call that the Pacers have needed all season, because right now you're running out of wake-up calls, and I think this might have been the last one.
I mean, it's game 84 now for the Pacers, right? They've already played 83 games. One of them didn't count because it was the in-season tournament championship. How many wake-up calls do you need?
Too many.
You shouldn't have to call down to the front desk and say, "Hey, call me. Remind me when it's time to wake up." You're not. This isn't a hotel. This is NBA basketball. This looked like a young team that was scared of the moment. That did not have any idea what the bright lights looked like. It felt like everything they experienced in the in-season tournament was just washed away. And I'm sorry to say it like that, but this team just looks so flat on every level, especially in the first half. Now I think in the second half they were able to cut the lead down to 12. They were able to put a little bit of a dent into what Milwaukee had built up so big. But you have to realize Milwaukee took their foot off the gas a little bit, and Indiana was pushing their foot on the gas a little bit more. So how much can you really take away from the second half? It's hard to really say, but I just hope that Indiana learned something from this game and they come out and play much better. We've seen them do that in the regular season, and I'm hoping that continues, but it's just hard to predict. And the fact that Giannis did not play, we knew Giannis was going to be out. I think everybody knew that. Everybody was getting their hopes up for this team. But once again, Indiana, they just overlooked this Milwaukee team, I think, by how they played. Milwaukee was just better in almost every aspect of the game.
They really were. And I think the home crowd was rocking. I really do think that's going to make a big difference for the Pacers. But overall, they should be embarrassed. They should. And I know I take this too seriously, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do as well. But the Pacers need to look in the mirror. And I think specifically, Tyrese Haliburton, as talented as he is, our all-star, our starter in the all-star game, our franchise player, needs to say, it starts with me. And when we talked about in our mailbag what Tyrese has to do, I said one of the things I said, he has to be top 2 in field goal attempts, if not third, only because Miles Turner is having a game.
Yeah.
Turner was not having a game, and you look at it, and Haliburton was 5th in field goal attempts, but he was close to being just about 7th almost. He was, he ends up getting 7 field goal attempts, but it was, think about this, he had 3 field goal attempts in the first quarter. All right, he was 2 of 3. He had 4 field goal attempts by halftime. He was 3 of 4 from the field. It's not like he was missing shots. He wasn't taking them, and we know he's already a pass first guy, but after a while, it started to become a little bit strange because he knew what the deficit was. At one point, this deficit reached 30 points, and he still wasn't looking for a shot, and I think that that's got to be the biggest adjustment that we see in game 2. I mean, to put things in perspective, TJ McConnell had 6 field goal attempts in one quarter. Haliburton ends with 7 in the game.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to see Haliburton. It's not to say shoot 7 field goal attempts in the first quarter, but I want to see him come out there, in game 2 with like at least 5 field goal attempts in that first quarter and set the tone. Because I said this is someone that needs at least 15 shots. That's what he needs to be at. And taking 7, you're not beating anybody in the NBA if Tyrese Haliburton has 7 shot attempts, unless maybe it's Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, he didn't look like the all-star point guard that was starting in the all-star game. He looked
No.
more like George Hill back in the 2012, 2013 Pacers that doesn't play defense. It's a George Hill that doesn't play defense, and that's not a good George Hill. So I'm sorry, but you're right. I mean, everything that starts with the blame, it starts with Tyrese Haliburton.
It has to.
And I understand, people want to blame Rick. People want to blame, everybody else on the team. It's fine. Rick has faults in this game too.
Definitely.
11 players is way too many guys that you're throwing out there on the court. And if you can't even put Jarris Walker out there and you're throwing 11 guys out there, like at least put somebody out there that's like a wing type of big that can do a little bit more defensively, like potentially. I mean, I don't know. To me, like I wouldn't have played anybody like that. I would have just went to like an 8-man rotation probably and really shortened things up. But yeah, I think one thing too that you can't overlook here, Facci, is the Pacers missed 7 free throws in this game tonight. They lose by 15. That makes it an 8-point game. And then they were outscored by 18 points from the 3-point line. So you put those 18 points with the 7 missed free throws, that's 25 points that Indiana, really just kind of left there on the table. I wouldn't say they left it on the table, but they just missed so many good looks from 3, took so many bad shots. Shot selection was terrible. I mean, I just think overall, just an ugly, ugly game from Indiana. They kind of got it back to like striking distance, but never were able to get over the hump. Their biggest lead was 2, is right at the beginning of the game. Milwaukee got the lead all the way up to 30 points. It was Milwaukee pretty much dominating Indiana for 45 minutes plus in this game. Indiana was just trying to, claw their way back into it in the second half, but at that point it was too little too late.
It really was just a disaster of a game. I mean, the last time we saw the Pacers, they scored about 60 more points. It was more than 60, but I'm never the greatest with math. But I just feel that in this game, they had those opportunities. And you saw guys have good looks at threes. I mean, sometimes they weren't the best shots, but there was times that Ben Shepherd had good looks at threes. I mean, Obi Toppin, a guy that was a really good three-point shooter this year, was 0 for 4. It just felt that the bench overall, I think the bench was about 1 of 13 from 3, which is, it's obviously it's putrid. The moment looked too big for too many players, but I feel that guys like Doug McDermott, Isaiah Jackson, I just don't know. The moment at times definitely did look too big for Ben Shepherd. He had a time where he stepped out of bounds, and Jalen Smith had some rough turnovers. I don't know. Obviously, they need to shorten the bench rotation, but there's certain guys that I don't know if we're going to see, period, in game 2. And I think that has to happen because right now the Pacers, they did shoot themselves in the foot. The amount of first half turnovers that they had, pretty much first quarter turnovers, was like, this looks like a team that just, I don't know where they had been for the past week, but I think they didn't benefit from having that time off. I think they would have done a lot better if they had played maybe 2 days later after that Hawks game, or 3 days, just to keep that going, because they really cooled off.
Yeah, we've seen how long layovers have not been good for Indiana. I think they had a long layover after they beat Philadelphia and then got beat by like 50 points to Orlando. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where long layovers have not been good for Indiana, and maybe that was kind of the case here. They're a young team. They're used to playing a lot of games. Who knows? But I think at this point, Facci, we've hit on some of the big points. We also did an interview before this part of the podcast with Derek Schultz that we're going to air here after this break. But before we get into it, you talked about shooting themselves in the foot. If you're listening to this podcast and you have not checked out our merchandise store, you're shooting yourself in the foot because we have got some incredible merch. We've got crew necks, we've got hoodies, we've got new t-shirts, we've got some awesome tank tops, we've got phone cases, we got all the merch you can think about on our T Public page, and you can get 30% off on all of your orders if you sign up for their email alerts, which you can probably sign up and then unsubscribe once you sign up and get your deal off. So you're not constantly being bombarded with spam email. But I'm just saying, 30% off. The merch is looking great. You got some merch. Your wife got some merch. I got some merch. I'm rocking it right now here on the podcast.
I ran
So
back and got more today. I needed the
yeah,
Beat the Buck shirt, and I got the athletic fit. That way, I can wear it in the gym. I can
yeah,
feel good about it. And plus, who doesn't love, playoff shirts that you could look back on years later? I love those. I kind of collect a lot of those. We have a little bit of something for everybody. You're going to want to run up there. And who doesn't love saving a couple bucks? Save 30%. Sign me up for that all day. I could
yeah.
unsubscribe later.
Yeah, save your bucks, but don't save the Milwaukee Bucks. We don't want them saved
Yes.
at all. So, but yeah, make sure you guys check that out. And I will say, like, to try to kill some time today, like you talked about, it's just been so long for this game. Like the anticipation for this game, I knew that when you wait for that long, it's never going to be good. It never felt good
Always
to
a
me all
letdown.
day. I know you were excited. You're texting me earlier today. I'm just thinking
Way
to
too
myself,
excited.
everybody's picking the Pacers to win. Everything kind of feels like it should be Pacers, Pacers, Pacers. It's not going to be the Pacers. I kind of knew that going into it. I had a feeling Indiana was not going to win this game. Milwaukee had all the fuel they needed because everybody was kind of counting them out. Even though it feels like it might be a little more 50-50 on what people were picking, it just felt like they were not getting the respect that they deserve, especially for those that have podcasts. So I'm not gonna lie, Facci. Today, I left my house around like 3:30, went to the gym. I did the Stairmaster for 35 minutes, and then I got on the treadmill for 65 minutes. I
Hey,
burned over a
nice.
thousand calories on the machines, and I was just ready to go. And I'm just telling you, I almost feel like I want to go back because I'm just so annoyed with how everything went. I mean, just really disappointed with this effort. And I know we're gonna have Derek Schultz on here in a second to talk about the rest of this game and kind of get his thoughts on everything. But just really, really, really disappointed in the effort. I'm not mad that they lost. I'm mad at the effort that they played with.
I mean, look, I think you showed more effort and burned more calories on that court than Doug McDermott. I mean, running around, not scoring. You guys put up the same stats. At least you got the calories to show for it. But I think in this instance, the one thing I want to end on is that it's a bummer that this Pascal Siakam performance is going to be forgotten. 36 points. I mean, I just felt like I had tweeted out early in the game when I saw Siakam probably hit his first 2 or 3 shots. I said, you got to play through Siakam. You got to keep feeding him. 15 of 25, 36 points, 13 rebounds. I felt like he was awesome. And I just feel like that type of performance should come in a win. And the Pacers were never a threat in this game. So, that really stinks for Siakam. I do look forward to, because that guy was there. He
Yeah.
belonged. He had been in the playoffs. He has a ring, and it was very evident who had not been there. Pascal Siakam's a real one. He's a true guy that you can count on in the playoffs. I look forward to seeing what he has in game 2, but I look forward to seeing his teammates step up around him in game 2.
Yeah, I mean, he was really the only guy that was consistent all night. Never felt like the moment was too big for him. I know they were asking him to do different things defensively. I know that Milwaukee, one thing that they did that we haven't talked about is, they brought Bobby Portis out kind of early in their rotations, brought in Malik Beasley. So they kind of went smaller a little bit there with Chris Middleton guarding Pascal Siakam. Middleton, I think, was really the difference maker for Milwaukee in this game. I know Bobby Portis had a nice double-double, was pretty efficient too. I think he had a great plus minus, like a plus 27, something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
Middleton, 9 of 14, like we talked about it. Like he shot above 50% every single time they played the Pacers this year. He looked like old school Middleton. And I said that
Still got
on
it.
multiple podcasts that we've done this week. And I did a weekend episode with Ty Windish. She asked me to come on the Euro Step, and we just went ahead and did a crossover pod. But I was just saying, I think he's the X factor for Milwaukee because really he kind of carried Milwaukee in that second half because Dame had 0 points. And it was kind of the Middleton Portis show. And Pat Bev had a couple different shots there, but really to me it was just letting Middleton kind of get cooking again. And yeah, I think Indiana, like they have enough to win this series still. Like I'm not counting them out whatsoever, but that first game effort, it makes me feel stupid that I even thought Indiana could win the series based on how they played tonight. I'm just hoping that it was jitterbugs. It was a lot of just like first experience of this. Now that they've got their hopefully last wake up call of the season, they'll come out and play much better for the next 6 games.
I look like a clown right now. I can't tell you how many unanswered texts I have of everybody coming at me because of how I told them the Pacers would be ready for this game. And yeah, hey, the joke's on me, I guess, that I couldn't just get I couldn't be any more excited going into game one. I'm going into game two with a little bit of a different feeling, but at the same point, I'm happy the layover is not going to be so drastic. We just got to get through it. It's Monday when you're listening to this. We got to get through Monday. Come Tuesday, this team's going to be ready to rock, and they should be feeling like the season's on the line. So,
Yeah.
Alex, that's all I got, but I'm ready to hear what Derek's got.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come back with our conversation with Derek Schultz. Joining us now, he is the self-proclaimed trusted and handsome source for Purdue. It is Derek Schultz joining me and Facci on this podcast. Talk about the Pacers. 109-94 loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. Derek, what a game by the Pacers.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. We were joking kind of off the air that I hope that I was sounding okay because I've just been like, not to get too graphic, I've got like this sinus thing and I'm all like gunked up and Kleenexes are all over the place and just sticky and gross and awful. And that is kind of how the Pacers played. We've been waiting so long. I had sent this tweet like an hour before tip-off that really it had been 5 years pretty much since real playoff basketball, right? Because the bubble, of course, was their last real performance, but everything about the bubble just kind of felt strange. And to wait that long and then to have loyal Pacers fans rewarded with that, I think, Facci, you said it, just a really, really, even devastating level performance. Even, it's a best of 7, right? Series isn't over, game to game, all of that stuff. But I think you can still accept all of that while also understanding that this was just a really pitiful performance.
It really was. And honestly, Derek, do you think is it any part of it that without Giannis, maybe the Pacers took their foot off the gas just a little bit? I mean, I've never seen the media talk about us this much in this positive of a light. I don't know. Maybe that put that chip on the shoulder for Milwaukee because they came out in a way that we just didn't.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard, well, they're tight, or, Milwaukee has more playoff experience, which I know was a storyline kind of going into this series. But really what kind of bothered me about the game, guys, it gave me this vibe that there wasn't a sense of urgency that I think playoff basketball needs. The fact that they went so deep into the bench, the fact that those spare parts played a lot. And look, maybe it wasn't the Pacers' night. Maybe they were destined for a 15, 17-point loss, whatever it ended up being. But I just didn't feel like the sense of urgency was there, even in a best-of-7 series, for anybody, for the coaching staff, for the players, all of it. This isn't January against Charlotte. This is big boy basketball time. And, even if you get behind 30 points, I mean, we see NBA teams come back from big rallies before. Hell, the Pacers have done it. So I didn't really like the vibe that I got from this game throughout the 4 quarters. It just lacked the sense of urgency that I think playoff basketball requires, even in a game one, even in an opener.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the first half scoring, the Bucks had 69 points. They finished in the second half with 40 points, and that's kind of been the Pacers' problem is their first half performance defensively. And Rick Carlisle has to chew them out at halftime. Then they finally wake up and start playing in the second half. That happened the last game of the season against the Hawks. Like, I know that they were able to score on the Hawks a little bit better, but it was just the Bucks got up so big so early and they got comfortable, and the Pacers didn't know how to respond. And I know that it's just game one. I know that everybody was expecting the Pacers to come out here and maybe punch Milwaukee in the mouth, but I think having a whole week off makes a big difference because I think Jared Greenberg talked about it. This was the Bucks had 3 practices since they've got Doc Rivers as their head coach. They had 4 this past week. So they've had more time to prepare, and everybody's been counting them out without Giannis. So I think they did have a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder to go out there and punch Indiana in the mouth, especially since Indiana beat them 4-1 in the regular season. But Derek, I think that Indiana's response was they didn't punch back. They just took the punch and just kept getting punched over and over and over again. And it took them until the third quarter really to finally wake up. I mean, Pascal Siakam, the only Pacer really to do anything significant for this team. If they don't have Siakam, I mean, they only scored 94 points in this game. This is not an Indiana basketball team that scores 94 points and wins a basketball game. That's just not who they are.
No, and I think one of the disheartening things about it too is that it's not like this was some like fluke like A plus Dame goes for 55 level Bucks game either. I mean, he had that big first half, but then he did nothing after that. Like I didn't think the Bucks played overwhelmingly well. And they still got run off. You know what I mean? Like this never really felt like it was a game that they had a chance to win. And that's another thing that's kind of disheartening. I go game to game and I try to flush performances because I think each game is its own entity. But you know, when talking about previewing this series, I think the problem is that the 5-game sample that we had was all done before January 4th. You know, think about all the changes that the Pacers have had since then. And think about the changes that the Bucks have had. I mean, the Bucks stylistically are completely different from what they were over the first couple of months of the season with the coaching change, and defensively they're different as well. So, I think it's just I had a hard time. I think some Pacers fans wanted to say, okay, well, Giannis is out, and we won 4 out of 5, and they're old, and their window's closing, our window is opening. Fine. I understand that kind of rationale, but these guys have pride. Like Pat Bev has pride, and he's been through 10,000 of these moments. Damian Lillard, the same thing. And those guys aren't going to, you mentioned it, Alex, fight back. You don't have to worry about those guys swinging. They're going to swing. They're going to go down swinging, even if they are going down, and they weren't going down tonight.
Yeah, the crazy thing is the last time we saw the Pacers, they scored 157 points. Almost a franchise. It is a franchise record. Well, it's not, but it's the most they scored this year. They could have broke the record anyway. Tonight, 94 points. That's actually the lowest that they scored all season. Giannis led the NBA points in the paint, led the NBA in fast break points. Obviously, a big absence for Milwaukee, but they were able to push forward. In this game, I felt it was Dame that really set the tone. In that first half, he scores 35 points. Ironically, doesn't score anything in the second half, but what he brought in the first half, the Pacers had no answer for. Was there a part of you that was saying, hey, that's Milwaukee's guy? He's going out there being aggressive. Now, we got to see our guy do that in Tyrese, and he simply did not. Was that an eye-opener that you were just maybe waiting to say, when are you going to shoot the ball?
Again, this felt like a game that everyone treated like it was a Wednesday night in January against Charlotte, Haliburton included. I appreciate that he wants to facilitate. He doesn't want to force, and credit Milwaukee. I mean, they did a really nice job in focusing in on him, but you can't win with TJ McConnell taking more shots. That can't happen.
Almost double.
And I think it was just kind of the whole problem with this game. Like when the Pacers had chances to really kind of make Milwaukee sweat, there was a sequence where it was like Ben Shepherd and there was a shot for Doug McDermott that could have made it, I think, an 11-point game. And you're like, those guys can't be the ones that you're relying on to get you back into this in playoff basketball. Like that, Shepherd stepping out of bounds and he's missing other shot. I mean, Doug McDermott, I don't even know if arguably he should be on the floor, period. And Haliburton, again, it just kind of goes back to the sense of urgency. I don't want him forcing it. I don't want him, just throwing up a bunch of step back 25 footers all game, but he's got to be more assertive than he was tonight, because this is, again, the playoffs. This is what you do. You ride your horses, and Haliburton and Turner sitting for a huge stretch of that second quarter when the game was really getting away. There were a lot of things that confused me about how this game was treated.
Yeah, and I think even if you look in the fourth quarter, like Indiana cut the lead to 12 going into the fourth, and they still pretty much rode a bench unit with Pascal Siakam. Like they didn't learn anything from the first half. It's like you saw this all bench lineup pretty much just get obliterated. The bench was bad in this game. They had 19 points total. Like everybody was bad. Like let's just be honest. Besides Siakam, everybody was pretty much bad in this game. But the bench was just not playing well together. They had no offensive rhythm, and it's like you can't afford to like let your guys sit that many minutes. Like you cannot have Haliburton only playing 38. Siakam played 40. Like I think he needs to be around like 43 based on what they're doing out there. And they finally went big with Siakam, Toppin, and Jalen Smith. It just, to me, I was just really disappointed, like you said, with the effort that they came out with. It felt like to me like this was a team that did not know what the playoffs were like. And I know Rick Carlisle was ready for this game more than anything because he knows the difference between playoffs and regular season. But half these guys on the roster don't. And Tyrese Haliburton taking 7 shots, being the fifth most field goal attempts of anybody on the team, that can't happen with your star player. And Derek, I will say this. I'm sure you saw this play when he was defending Patrick Beverley. I think it was in the third quarter. He knocked the ball loose, and Pat Bev dove on the ball, got the loose ball, kicked it out for an open 3. And that, to me, was a pure example of how this game was played differently from Milwaukee versus Indiana. They got to every 50-50 ball, and they wanted it more. Indiana acted like they were just happy to be there.
Yeah, and it sounds like, almost like cliched, and this is what we do with playoff basketball, right? Like, who wants it more and all that, but there is an element of truth to it. The fact that, urgency and want to and all of that, and the Pacers, I guess, aren't used to this stage, but at the same time, guys, and I said this at halftime, I can't give them an excuse for that stretch. And that first half was one of the worst halves I've seen a Pacers team play ever. I mean, they were actively bad. That was like watching like a bad Big Ten team with, they're bouncing the ball off their foot and their shot clock violations, and they're throwing a pass into the second row in the stands. It was really bad. They had 32 points at the 2-minute mark of the first half. 32 points. They've had umpteen quarters of 32 or more points. So there was just, I don't want to overreact in the moment because this is a long series and things ebb and flow and they can change on a dime. But this was about, if you were to script like the worst way for the Pacers to start these playoffs, I think tonight would come pretty close to being the perfect script.
Derek, I couldn't agree more. I was devastated watching this first half. I mean, things were getting so bad. And my wife turned to me and she started saying things like, "You have a beautiful family, we're all healthy." I was like, "Babe, come on." Like, it's not that serious. I'm just saying this is tough to watch right now. And I just felt like exactly what you said. The Pacers had 7 turnovers in about the first 15 minutes of gameplay. I mean, really nothing was going well for them. You're dying for Haliburton to shoot the ball a little bit more. I mean, Damian Lillard had 19 shots in the first half. He was even having heat check moments that if you're a Bucks fan, you could live by because you're saying this guy's hot. I think with Haliburton, you could live with if he was missing it. But the fact that he wasn't taking those shots when he needed to, that's what was really rough. Now, moving forward for this team, we talked about it. I think Carlisle was trying to throw a lot out there. Hey, maybe, Isaiah Jackson had some good minutes against the Bucks early in the season. Give him a shot. 3-point shooting's not working. Throw McDermott out there. What sort of changes in specific do you think we might see for game 2? Because something's got to change.
Well, I'm hoping they shorten the rotation because there are way too many guys playing tonight. And with the game still somewhat in doubt, I know that I said it never felt like the Pacers were really in it, but Alex, you mentioned it's a 12-point game going in the fourth, and I'm like, all right, well now you go back to Nembhard and Nesmith, and look, I know those guys struggled in Turner, and you bring back your horses, they come back out with the same. I think Obi was out there right to start the fourth. You're just like, what are we doing here? Like, here's the chance to really kind of make the run, and then suddenly 12 goes to 20, and then that's kind of all she wrote by the 7 or 8 minute mark. So I think the big glaring thing to me is that fewer guys need to play. Now they're going to have to get more than they got tonight out of particularly those 3. I mean, you guys are right. Everybody was bad, but I just thought, God, Nesmith got cooked the first half, and Nembhard couldn't make a shot. And I thought Turner, of all the people that shouldn't be tight, that at least have some experience, Turner is the one that you think would be a little bit more comfortable. And he looked like he was pressing as well. Getting those guys back and getting on the same page. But I just think it really does come down, and you hate to hang it all on one person, but this is kind of how it goes in the NBA. It comes down on Haliburton kind of changing his mindset and being more assertive and aggressive. And that's nothing that Rick Carlisle can do. That's something that Haliburton is going to have to do here moving forward, because, you go back, you pop in a tape of tonight, and then you pop in a tape of those games against Milwaukee in November, December, and it's night and day. And I get it that the Bucks are a lot different defensively and stylistically than they were in the coaching change. And, Pat Bev's there now, and he wasn't there then. So there have been a lot that have kind of changed, and then Haliburton with the injury, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got to bring more to the table, aggression wise than he brought tonight.
I don't think the Bucks did that much different to make Tyrese not be as aggressive as he was back in November, December. I mean, I just feel like he was looking to pass the ball. It was like he wasn't looking to score. And you talk about it, 27 points a game against the Bucks in 5 games previous to this. He wasn't even close to sniffing that. 7 shot attempts out of everybody on the team, like that's just bad. And I understand Siakam was cooking and he had 36 points, was the leading scorer of anybody in this game, 15 to 25. But like Siakam, if you're wanting to convince Siakam to come back to Indiana and re-sign long-term, he wanted to come here because he thought Tyrese Haliburton could be that 1-2 punch with him. In game one, Tyrese Haliburton showed he's not that guy. And I think that Damian Lillard reminded him, hey, I saw what you did. I remember what you did in the bubble, or excuse me, in the in-season tournament when you tapped on your wrist and said it's your time now. This was personal for the Bucks. I mean, they took their butt whooping in the regular season personal, and Indiana acted like they walked in here like, oh, we got this, especially without Giannis. And we've seen this Indiana team do that multiple times throughout the year, overlooking their opponent, especially when they have a bit of a weakness to him because Giannis, the best player in the series, isn't playing. But that experience is something you cannot take away from them. I know that it's more than just like inexperience versus experience, but like Tyrese Haliburton, if he wants to be the face of the franchise, Derek, he can't play like this the rest of the series. I hope this is a one and done type thing for him, because if he comes out and plays like this any other game, that's not going to look good for his resume.
No, and he just needs to refine himself, because I really think if you go really towards the injury, but the past 2 or 3 months, it's just, we were all ready to crown him, and we kind of did. And then the injury happens, and then he's kind of completely out of gas. I think you could tell at the All-Star break, and he just really hasn't been the same player. I mean, this was a guy that we talked about being first team All NBA, and that's obviously a lot of that stuff is gone now. But I agree with you, and it's tough because people will be listening to this and being like, well, what are you guys talking about? Like the rest of the roster was actively bad tonight outside of Siakam, right? We're just hanging on one guy. Like it's lazy to just pin on one guy. But this is what the playoffs are about. When everyone else is struggling, you need that one guy to step up and bring it to the table. And I felt like Siakam did that, and Haliburton did it. They're just not going to win this series with him being an inactive participant offensively. And I don't mean like getting like 12, 13 assists. I mean, they need him to score. And he just didn't do that tonight. I mean, 7 shots is just, it's mind boggling. And to think that they would overlook Milwaukee, that's even more mind boggling. I mean, this is a team, with a core that has won a championship, and guys that have been around the block, for years and years and years. So if that's the case, then maybe the Pacers have bigger problems than we thought if they were to overlook an opponent like this, even a weakened one without Giannis.
Yeah, and I wonder how this impacts Giannis's timeline at this point. Hey, Milwaukee, they won this game. Do they maybe look to rest him a little bit more? We don't know, but we do feel that he's probably going to come back at some point during this series if he can. He's a really tough guy. He's resilient. I imagine we're going to see him out there at some point. But Damian Lillard played, the first half, we'll say, was absolutely incredible. 35 points, second half, doesn't score. I felt like Andrew Nembhard came alive after those double technicals. I felt that he really locked in. Is that something that the Pacers can maybe build off of to say, hey, we think we might have figured something out, and moving forward, they could have a bit of a better control over it? Because Lillard in the series, the 4 games that he got to play against the Pacers, he was shooting just 32% against Indiana. Tonight, it looked like a completely different story. Do you think this is something they could build upon?
Yeah, if Giannis is out, then if you can just hold Lillard to like 25 or fewer, I think you feel pretty good. I mean, you should be able to do enough offensively to find a way to win there. And you're right. I mean, after that first half, there was kind of nothing going on when it comes to that. But they just defensively tonight, that stretch in the second quarter I thought was really bad. But overall, like I don't think it was one of the worst games that they've played defensively. I just think offensively they were all over the place, and they were relying on guys that you normally shouldn't rely. You shouldn't rely on to make big shots in January games, make big shots in April games, and stuff like that can't happen. So looking kind of long-term view on Giannis, if they're not able to get Tuesday night's game, I think they're going to have let's assume that Giannis comes back for game 3, which is an assumption at this point. And even then he'll not be anything close to 100%. I think it's going to be a tough task. And I get that they won 4 out of 5 against them. So you say, well, 4 out of 5 is no big deal. I think you really have to get Tuesday night's game. If we're assuming that Giannis is going to come back, because it's going to get that much tougher. This team is this Bucks team over the last 2 months have been okay. They're not as good, I don't think, as their record suggests. And then you take Giannis out of the equation. I mean, it's not a great basketball team. So the Pacers really, I think, need to, again, seize the moment and sense of urgency and all of that. I think Tuesday night is a game that you really have to approach as, again, I'm going to reach into the cliche, but I'm sorry, Alex, must win
No.
for them to come back and win this series.
Is this JMV? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
But to be honest, like you talked about it, like the Pacers defense was really, outside of probably the second quarter, was not that bad. To hold Milwaukee to 109 points, most times Indiana would live with that. It's just the fact that they had 0 going for their offense. Now, I don't expect Indiana to shoot as poorly as they did from 3 for the rest of the series. Now, they haven't been shooting the ball as well, and they've been missing some of their 3-point shooting because, Buddy Hield's not here. Ben Mathurin was shooting the ball pretty well. And I felt like, and this was one of those games where you really felt the absence of Benedict Mathurin off the bench. This is one of those things to me, and I tweeted this, you can kind of mask what Mathurin did in the regular season with McConnell on top and playing as free and as loose as they were. But when it gets, like crunch time here in a big game like this, you needed someone that can go out there and get you a bucket at all times. And Mathurin just has that capability. I mean, the fact that you're relying on TJ McConnell to get so much generated for your second unit offense, there's a reason why TJ McConnell has been not very good in playoff series. If you go back and look at his playoff numbers, they're pretty, non-existent. Like they're around like 2 or 3 points a game. And he's had, negative plus minus in playoff series because he is a bit of a weakness. Like there was a clear play, I think it was in the third quarter. He had a wide open 3, missed it, got the offensive rebound back, kicked it right back to him at the top of the key. He sat there for 5 seconds, pulled it up again when Tyrese Haliburton was wide open on the other side. So to me, it's like, and I'm not hating on McConnell. I think McConnell's a fine player, but he is what he is. And you're just missing that legit scoring off the bench without a Mathurin, without, Buddy Hield at least here to shoot some threes. You're relying so much on McConnell. And then if you're going to go to an all bench lineup, that's not going to work in the playoffs. And I feel like Carlisle has to make sure, and I think he did throughout the game, didn't really allow an all bench unit to stay out there. I think he ended up bringing back Siakam or Haliburton, but you cannot allow it to be 4 bench guys in Siakam or Haliburton. I think you have to have 2 starters in there at all time.
Yeah, it felt like at times tonight that they were relying on McConnell to be like their second guy behind Siakam. And it's like, well, you can't really win like that. I don't even think TJ McConnell thinks that you can win with TJ McConnell being your second guy. So I agree with you. It felt like, and I don't know, I haven't had the chance to listen to his post-game press conference. We're taping this right now, right? 30 minutes after the game ended. But I wonder if he just wanted to default to the veterans because he felt like, Nesmith and Nembhard and those guys were just not quite ready for the moment. I don't know what Carlisle's thinking was when it comes to that, but it should not have been as much of an offensive struggle, I don't think, as it was. Milwaukee is a better defensive team than they were in the previous 5 meetings. They're still not that great defensively, and they looked like completely locked down tonight because the Pacers just couldn't do anything. Missing open shots. A lot of those are shots that they normally make, but even when you even that out, some of the offense tonight was just aggressively bad.
It really was. And you could tell who it felt like was making their first real appearance in the playoffs. Or, there's some guys like an Aaron Nesmith, who Jalen Smith might have played a couple minutes here and there in the past, but they're pretty much new to the playoffs as well. So I think that was tough to notice, but tough to see and in reality play out. But do you think this could be the wake-up call this Pacers team needed? Because you got to go through these struggles. I know we want to feel that, hey, we had a good regular season, but the regular season you wipe the slate clean. And I think that this could be a wake-up call for the Pacers in game 2 to know it doesn't matter what you did from October to at this point, everything starts fresh. Do you think that will prove to be reality, or is it just, hey, maybe a bad loss?
Yeah, I think it can be a wake-up call, and I think the Pacers could turn around and, I think the Pacers could turn around and win 4 straight. Really, I do. I don't think that's going to happen, but
I hope so.
I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility because that's how playoff basketball is. We see this stuff all the time where, it's game to game and things can change. But all of that said, I think the Pacers have had a little bit of a, you know, you can have a bad game. You can have two bad games. You can't have two bad weeks because then you're going home. And so they can't let this kind of be a prolonged thing. They've got to fix it now, right away. And you've got to, flush it and then kind of move on to the next one. So I'm not completely down in the dumps. I still think this is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. And that's how I felt going in. Tonight doesn't really change that. I just saw some things tonight that I thought were, some things that were just indefensible, but other things that just kind of confused me. I really was. I try not to let the Pacers surprise me, right? Because over 82 games, we've seen a little bit of everything. But I was legitimately surprised, guys, with the way that they played tonight. Disappointed, of course, but my number one feeling was I was just surprised that is what we got after a week off and after safely being in the playoff field as the 6th seed, right? Like this felt like the Pacers were riding. They'd been playing good basketball for the last couple of weeks. It felt like they had a lot of things and the Giannis injury pointing in their direction. And now it just feels like it's completely pointed the other way and they've got to turn it back towards them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point because it just didn't feel like the Pacers team we've actually seen probably the last 10, 15 games. Like they were 7-3 in their last 10 games. And I think people were kind of, excited for the direction they were heading. It felt like they were playing so many meaningful games in the regular season where they had to win to stay above, the play-in tournament. And then all of a sudden they come out here and kind of lay an egg. And it was just kind of like, okay, are we taking, another step back where we just got to a couple of weeks ago? So I think that how they respond in game 2 will kind of tell everything and set the table for the rest of the series, because this Pacers team, for the regular season at least, they've always bounced back after a bad loss, and they've come out punching and playing a lot better. So I thought it was very possible they split game 1 and 2 with Milwaukee. I was thinking more so Indiana maybe steals game 1, Milwaukee bounces back, steals game 2, then Indiana has a chance to try to win 3 and 4, right? I still think that there's a chance, like you said, that they could win 2, 3, and 4 potentially. But now that you look at it, if you think the Pacers win this series in 6, 4 out of the next, 5 games is going to be a very, very difficult task. So are they going to be able to steal one in game 7 on the road? That doesn't seem likely. So they're going to have to figure something out clearly. But I'm just looking at this team now and I'm just trying to figure out what adjustments can they actually make, because they just don't have a lot of room for error with this team. And I don't see anything besides, like you said, shortening the rotation.
Yeah, and Haliburton stepping up, right? I think
Yeah.
we're all in agreement there. I mean, he's just going to have to be much, much better than he's been lately. Really, over the not just tonight. I just think he's been a lesser player for the last 2 or 3 months than he was at the start of the season. So I think that's what you need to beat a team like Milwaukee. I know people got excited because of the regular season success and because of the Giannis injury, but I've firmly treated this as Milwaukee being the favorite team because of their experience, because of home court, because of all of that, because of those factors. And I think the Pacers need to view it that way as well. I mean, we've seen that's when they play really at their best, is when they're trying to kind of meet the moment, right? And hopefully they find a way to meet the moment here, because if they go down 0-2, there's still a path for them to come back, but it becomes a really, really difficult and treacherous path, assuming that Giannis returns for game 3.
Yeah, we already talked about Dame. Yeah, he was real good that first half. But I also felt that Milwaukee's role players played well. I mean, Patrick Beverley, talked about him. He played really good defense. He was a plus 17 this game. Chris Middleton looked like the Chris Middleton of old. Bobby Porter steps into the starting lineup. He gives Milwaukee a double-double. Is there a role player that you feel could really step up in game 2 for the Pacers that maybe didn't come and bring it all tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critically important that Nembhard gives them more than he gave them tonight, on both ends. But shot making, I think, is another one. If we're to assume that Haliburton kind of comes back to being his usual self, and Siakam as well, and then you've got Nesmith making some shots, I think that's big. So I hate to even kind of call him, because Nesmith is a pretty big piece of what they want to do. But when I'm looking outside of the star players, I think he's the one. Bench wise, I think the problem with McConnell is just asking him to do too much. I think if you sprinkle in some TJ, that's great. And that's kind of the role that he thrives. But tonight they were too heavily reliant on him. So my answer, Facci, would be Neesmith for that. I think he's a big X factor to them winning this series.
I think a lot of people have leaned heavily on Neesmith being the X factor for Indiana, and it also just goes to show, like, if you need Neesmith to be this consistent every single game for this series to go in the Pacers' favor, maybe you do need to look in the mirror a little bit at your roster and say, okay, we are, and that's what's great about the playoffs. It exposes everything, because in the regular season, you can feel really good about your team. Your team might have great chemistry. Their bench is really strong, but when it comes to playoff basketball, everything gets exposed. And now you're looking at things through a smaller lens, but you're able to kind of focus on what's going to get us there to win. And I think that by them going out and getting Pascal Siakam, they've addressed one problem, that they didn't have that go-to guy. Now they have Pascal Siakam. I mean, the fact that he had 36 points in this game, like, he was very comfortable, the only guy that looked, under control. I was really disappointed with Miles Turner. I won't lie. I thought his first quarter performance, really, I mean, he just took so many unnecessary shots that aren't like Miles, like 3 of 10 from 3, and he was chucking
and bad misses.
Yes,
like there were some that even come close,
and they were not good shots. Like, he was catching them like quick release. Like, it's when Miles shoots the ball fast, it never goes in. He needs time to set up and get a little bit of space with that pick and pop. And I know that Milwaukee's probably worked on trying to cut that action off a little bit, but there was just so many bad takes from him. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if Miles misses shots, I don't care as long as they're good shots, but they were not good shots. And so I just felt like from top to bottom, besides Siakam, the shot selection in this game was terrible. So you had bad offense mixed with mediocre defense, and that's just not Pacers basketball. So to me, I think that you're going to see a much more improved Pacers team in game 2. I think they're going to come out a little bit better expectations, but is there something to be said about how the first 7 games that have been played this weekend, all the home teams have pretty much won in convincing fashion?
Yeah, because generally speaking, you see not only one but multiple road teams win game 1. I feel like usually to kind of set the tone for the series. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. I just think what you saw tonight was a team that had been there before with pride. They listened to all the same stuff that we listened to. And, a lot of people were pushing the Pacers as the sexy upset pick. Some weren't even calling it an upset pick. And I think you saw the response tonight from a prideful group of a bunch of veteran players. I mean, Brook Lopez is like 56 years old, and he posterized Neesmith tonight. I mean, that shows, Bobby Portis was into the game. Like the Pacers need that energy and that sense of urgency. It's not the NCAA tournament, right? It's not single elimination, but at the same time, like, all these games are really critically important. And I just felt like, just kind of tie a bow on our conversation. The mental approach tonight from the staff on down was just not something that I didn't like the vibe. I don't think that the Pacers have the benefit of feeling their way around in a playoff game. And it felt like tonight they were just kind of feeling their way around instead of kind of confidently approaching a plan and trying to execute it.
Yeah, Derek, I'm just really bummed. And I don't want to be too negative on this. It is just one game. We've seen teams come back from 3-1. And then actually, we've seen Doc Rivers blow numerous 3-1 leads in the playoffs. So this series is not over. But the Pacers should have that sense of urgency in game 2, that it almost should be treated like it's a game 7, because you don't want to go down 0-2 with Giannis potentially coming back. So, as we wrap up over here, please tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and maybe just give one last piece that, hey, if the Pacers need to make this change, if they're going to have any chance in the series.
Yeah, so at Schultz975 on X and Twitter, IBJ columns with Mark Monteith. He's a longtime Pacers writer as well. He and I rotate, so every other week. And then Jake and I, Query, who does the midday show on the Fan, we do a once a week podcast. Query and Schultz on Monday nights, or sorry, Tuesday nights now. Sorry, I should know the day. 7:30. QueryandSchultz.com if you want to check that out. I think what still kind of gives me some confidence is that the second that the Pacers take one in Milwaukee and get this thing back to Indiana, you're going to have a really charged up atmosphere and fans that are really hungry because, this has been a long wait for everybody. And I think even if they're down 0-2, it's going to be raucous for game 3, but you have to get there. You know, you have to put yourself kind of in that position. I want to say that I'm confident that Haliburton's just going to turn the switch on and become the player that we thought he was kind of growing to be early in the season, but I don't know. I don't know. This series, I think a lot of people were speaking in absolutes about this series, and it just shows that playoff basketball, you kind of throw all the other stuff out the window, man. Like it's a whole new ball game. And hopefully the Pacers saw tonight that they're not going to be able to lean on some of the old things that they were able to lean on, and they've got to they've really just got to establish a plan and go and execute it instead of trying to, tinker and play with things. And it just felt too loosey-goosey for me tonight. But you're right. I mean, Pacers have every chance in the world to win this series. It's going to be a long series. There are going to be other critical moments and critical games here. So the important thing is to just flush this one and move on to the next one. I wish they were tipping game 2 right now, because I want to forget about tonight as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that if you look at this game, like everything you wanted to happen, it just didn't work out for Indiana. And hopefully they can figure things out for playing a little bit faster. I think that they were not really playing their pace. I think they only had like 12 fast break points. They still had more points in the paint than Milwaukee, which is something you want to see. Teams that have usually dominated both those categories have won in the regular season. So they just got to make their shots a little bit more. But yeah, I think one thing that I'm also looking forward to is, does Rick Carlisle maybe kind of take some of the reins from Tyrese and start calling more set plays, where before in the regular season, it's like, Tyrese, just go do your thing. Let's just run random offense. Maybe Rick tries to design more play calls to get guys looks, just to get offense going, because if the offense is where it was at tonight, Derek, then I think that it's not going to be something that can happen in the playoffs. I don't think this random basketball that they've been playing all season long might work in the playoffs if this is the result they're going to get. So if you have to have more set plays just to get guys going, maybe that's an adjustment they can make as well.
Yeah, I mean, they'll get swept if they play like tonight.
Yeah.
Sure. And this, whatever it is, 5-year playoff losing skid will just continue. It's just been, hell on earth for Pacers fans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's a tough note to end on, but Derek, that's the 10th straight loss in the playoffs for the Pacers now. So that streak's got to end soon. I can't wait to end it. I want to do it in game 2, just like you. Hey, that game could not come soon enough. So I really want to thank you for coming back on. We always love having you on, setting the pace, and we look forward to the next time.
No problem, guys. Hopefully they go get game 2. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.